Hello. I'd like to start just by saying thank you to Simon and Richard and the team for putting on the conference today. And with that, I'll dive in. So, to introduce myself, my name's McLoughlin. I've been in the pharmaceutical industry about 23 years. I was a researcher, I've been in procurement, and I've been at Scientist.com since about 2016. Scientist was formed in 2007 in San Diego, and the founders believed there was a better way to do pharma research. In effect, they thought it was extremely inefficient. So what they did was they built the world's first and largest outsourced scientific services marketplace. Supporting over 130 clients, we have 24 of the top 30 biopharma, soon to be 26, who are actively sourcing projects through our platform. And as you can see, I think we've done in excess of about $1.5 billion in sales. So through that, we've handled tens and tens of thousands of requests for services. And really, the concept that we have is that our aim is to connect researchers with suppliers and get out of the way. If we can help them find each other, we can help them start work quicker. And to put that into perspective from a chemistry point of view, we have about 800 different suppliers on the platform in the chemistry area. We've supported in the past few years over $150 million in projects and nearly 10,000 individual requests. And the platform is growing, and it's growing steadily. We've already doubled the amount of requests that we supported in 2022 this year alone. So with that, I wanted to take you on a bit of a journey today on how we see outsourcing has changed. So if you cast your mind back to 2019, and I flew in from San Diego over the weekend, so I was up all night, so I'm a little bit bleary-eyed today, trying to think of what actually happened in 2019. And three things jumped out to me. One, it was when Notre Dame caught fire. It was when England won the Cricket World Cup, and apparently Kim Kardashian announced that she was going to become a lawyer, which basically made me think that everybody can have a dream, in effect. And for a procurement perspective, everything was really rosy. The whole aim in that time was around strategic sourcing, and it was working great. And really, the concept of strategic sourcing was around supplier consolidation. What you look to do is by consolidating your supply base, you can remove the inefficient processes around legal, finance, etc. You can combine to get better pricing, you reduce due diligence costs, etc. And the aim is to push researchers to use your strategic supplier as much as possible. You invest in the processes, and through that you access innovation. However, researchers didn't necessarily have the same view as procurement in that concept. They actually felt that sometimes the strategic approach restricted innovation because they couldn't use the newest and fastest and best technologies. Sometimes it wasn't the cheapest, sometimes it didn't meet the needs perfectly. And if they wanted to run a pilot, it took too long to implement. And from a supplier's perspective, when an organization went down this route, it provided a really high bar or a high barrier of entry for them. There was a lot of increased costs, and ultimately, to a certain extent, it stifled competition. And then 2020 came along and the pandemic. And that changed everything, because the whole concept around that strategic sourcing was really put into challenge. They had, certainly in the CMC space, there was a significant amount of consolidated outsourcing to the Asia-Pac region, and the result of that was that during the pandemic, the Asia-Pac region pretty much closed. Sites were shut, there were travel issues of being able to get there, so assay transfers were hard, and even after that, there was all the auxiliary costs around shipping, etc. And this really created a desire to change the supply chain and how pharmaceutical companies, how companies really looked to source services moving forward. So if you want to increase your supply chain options, this comes with challenges which need to be addressed. And I'm going to focus on three now. The first is accessing new suppliers, identify them. There are thousands out there. How do you work out from a global network who's the best quality, who has the innovation you want, who has the experience that you need? And then once you identify it, how do you maintain that information and ensure that your researchers are growing as fast or accessing the suppliers that you need to access? The second piece is that if you're looking to expand your supply base, you're going to deal with inefficiencies in the existing model. You look at the fact that if you want to run a pilot, you first need to put a CDA in place. Then you need to put potentially an agreement in place. Then you need to run the pilot. The pilot may not work. You've already wasted a large amount of time to be able to test a hypothesis. If you then go into a full relationship, you have to set them up on finance perspectives, you have to do due diligence on the suppliers. It can take months before a researcher can really start to experience and extract the value out of the relationship that they wanted to extract at the very beginning. And then finally, once you have identified the suppliers, how do you get researchers to use them? If you have a global network of researchers, how do you communicate to them? How do you ensure they know who they can now access? How do you ensure a smooth process of transferring specifications to the supplier, identifying the right supplier to go to, and ultimately, how do you compare and contrast those suppliers? If you're opening up the market to researchers, how are they going to know from supplier A, B, and C which one to choose? They don't necessarily have the time or the knowledge to make that decision, but in a procurement environment that you're seeing a massive reduction in access to resource and support, more is being placed on the researcher. So the aim that I would like to sort of talk to you now is how would you increase access in a fast and controlled manner? There is a legacy solution behind this, which is you can require a huge undertaking from a resource perspective. You can put a lot of money behind it. You can increase FTE costs across many areas, because it's not just in procurement that you would need to do this. You would need to do it in the finance because they're going to be handling more suppliers. You're going to be doing this in the legal area because you're ultimately going to have to put in contracts in place and manage those. And it's going to take a very, very, very long time. That's the ultimate challenge, is that to actually go the standard route, it's going to take a significant investment from the organization. So what I want to do is present an alternative that is now being used by more and more companies in a world where you can access a global supply base without additional cost or resource. You can look at a relationship now and say, right, from a whole supply base, you can have a CDA in place up front. You can have the service agreement pre-negotiated. You can have the due diligence done and setting up for billing. All of those challenges that you're experiencing when you want to expand your supply base, you can address up front. And that can be quite a transformative approach, because it means that if you're a researcher sat in this room, you could potentially go outside, find a supplier that it really interests you, you've never worked with them before, and work with them really, really quickly. If you can get everything up front and work proactively to put that in place, it means that in a conference you could meet somebody, have a conversation, and potentially be able to start work the same week. Not 6 months down the line, not 10 months down the line, but literally the same week. The next piece is, imagine a world where you have access to all the information that you need. From a supplier's perspective, it can be a new BD channel. It can be a different way to work with the industry. From a researcher's perspective, it's a way to understand innovation, understand what services a supplier offers. And the really nice thing is that this information can be updated real time by the suppliers. The suppliers still own the relationships. The supplier still owns the information that's being transferred. And procurement can easily digest it. Researchers can easily digest it. One of the potentially really nice ways of thinking of this is, in the past, probably year, we've seen a massive increase in sustainability becoming a real key driving factor within the pharmaceutical industry. We have clients now, very large pharmaceutical companies, who have minimum standards they expect their suppliers to meet by 2025, otherwise they will not work with those suppliers anymore, and that's supported from the board level. Last week I did a sustainability talk with Pfizer, Bayer and AstraZeneca, where they communicated out to the supply base the requirements that they have and they expect suppliers to fulfill. So now, how do you factor that into the sourcing decision? Well, if the supplier can promote what their SBTI targets are, what their CDP score is, what their My Green Lab assessment score is, at the time of when you're engaging with the suppliers, and they can do it for 130 clients at the same time or 140 clients, sustainability can now become a deciding factor. So if you have two suppliers, exactly the same, very rare, but same costs, everything else, sustainability can be that decision factor, and you can have the information to make the decision at your fingertips. The next piece is, if you're gonna access a global supply base, you need to do it diligently. There will be numerous people in procurement, in quality, probably recoiling at the thought of letting researchers go wild with every single supplier that is potentially available. Certainly in these later stage projects, there is a lot of risk associated with working with new suppliers, and we certainly understand that. But again, if we look at the problem in a different way, if we can proactively collect the information to enable an informed decision and to manage that risk, then you can open up the marketplace or open up the market in a very controlled manner. From a supplier's perspective, it's great because they get an opportunity to engage. From a researcher's perspective, they get to find innovation. And from a procurement perspective, it's great because they can competitively tender. So how would you do that? Well, the first is the commercial due diligence. You need to understand whether a supplier has the appropriate policies and procedures in place. Are they aware of anti-bribery, anti-corruption? Are they aware of politically exposed people? Have they got any confidentiality risks or data privacy risks? All of this is standard across the industry. The information that Pharma X wants is the same as the information as Pharma Y, but from a supplier's perspective, you're having to give it out twice. If you can consolidate that so that the supplier gives it out once, you ultimately reduce the costs on the supplier. That can be then reflected in the cost that you receive or the charges you receive for the service. The second piece is around the service-specific due diligence. Now here, you want to be really understanding the supplier's capabilities. In the CMC area, you're looking at their ability to deliver, what's from their ITIS to their access control policies, to their quality control, quality management systems, etc. Again, looking at the industry, the information Pharma X wants is the same as the information that Pharma Y wants. And again, the supplier faces the same challenge. They have to give it each time and spend time and effort and resource in providing information repetitively. And then lastly, you want to do on-site inspections. It's not good enough to know that the written due diligence is done, because a written due diligence is flawed. It only tells you the supplier knows what they should know. It doesn't tell you that they're putting it into practice. And again, if we think back to the commercial and the compliant, the written due diligence, what Pharma X wants is interested in is the same as Pharma Y from a pre-assessment perspective, not a study specific, but from a pre-assessment. Before you work with somebody, there is commonality, there is duplication. And you can see instantly now how inefficient the whole, when you look at the global picture, how much information is being duplicated, how much time can be wasted just by meeting these goals. If you can remove those out of the challenge, then you can speed things up. You can start to begin to work proactively, because from a supplier's perspective, they know what you need. They can tell you in advance before you ever want to work with them, before you engage with them. And then lastly, imagine every request that's ever placed gets support from a team of experts. At the moment, procurement is resource constrained. In every department I work with across the industry, everybody's under the cosh. They are struggling. They are being asked to do more with less. From a supplier's perspective, a lot of time is wasted chasing people to get responses, clarify specifications, etc. So now think of a world where when a request is placed, you have a team behind you to support your business, whether you're the client or the supplier or the CDMO, to make it as efficient as possible. You have help in chasing responses. You get provided technical expertise. You get on advice on who to engage. If you don't know who to work with for a particular project, imagine having a live person that you could speak to discuss your project and get recommendations. You can learn about suppliers' capabilities, run pilots quickly. And ultimately, you can access unique tools to provide a new option. So for example, if you look at the I&D enabling space, the common theme is for ease of work is to put everything with one supplier. Try and put the whole package with one supplier, bulk it up, try and reduce costs, etc. And that's because of all of the challenges that I talked about right at the beginning. But now imagine a world where you can have multiple suppliers working on your I&D project seamlessly. All of it's done, but you're picking the best quality supplier. The supplier that meets your cost needs, your quality needs, and your time requirements without the need to have to consolidate and accept lesser because of a strategic relationship. And that's really what can be offered now. And through this, what we see is a change in the game of how it works. So to give you a real life example, imagine speaking to Frederick. So Frederick is a scientist, chemist, worked for 20 odd years in the industry, has worked across many, many different projects, has delivered projects throughout his career, and now your researchers can just pick up the phone, drop and live chat to somebody and have a discussion on the technical aspects of their project. They can get advice on who to work with, get advice on what things to think about when making a decision and comparing and contrasting. Frederick sat there. So Frederick is here. If you want to speak to him, he's going to be outside. He's probably got a meeting with you. I found out he had 38 meetings in 2 days, which will be interesting. But this is the kind of person that researchers and suppliers can have access to be able to support their project in a different way than previous. And everything that I've talked about isn't a future concept. It's not a nice to have. It's not where we want to go. It's already here and it's already available. We have pharmaceutical companies using every single one of these features, from the commercial due diligence, from the written due diligence, from the on-site pre-assessments. We have suppliers who have joined, who have completed those assessments and identified new clients, started new projects, built new relationships. What we've been trying to do over the past few years across the industry is transform sourcing, and since 2019 we've been able to bring the expertise that we brought from human biological samples, from in vivo, from animal welfare, from biomarkers, from discovery, from preclinical, into this space so that we can help you transform the way of working to give you a new option. Not the legacy that's always been the same, but a way to be able to drive your projects quicker without compromising the quality and the compliance. So to give you a couple of examples, you can see here we had a researcher who's doing package compatibility. They came to us, they were able to identify over 5 suppliers. They got 3 SOWs in 3 days. 2 of those suppliers they'd never worked with before. So from this, they were able to go out to the market quickly, identify the right company for their project and proceed, knowing that it was done in complete compliance with the client's own internal requirements. They got all of the approvals that they needed. They got all of the contracts in place that was required. Take another one. This is where a supplier needed to complete RFIs or questionnaires, that due diligence piece that I was talking about, to get on the approved list of clients. So here we can see that what we did was when we built our RFIs, we built them with industry. We didn't do them in a little bucket on our own. We went out to the pharmaceutical companies, we looked at their existing processes, we consolidated, we removed duplication, we took best practice, so that now a supplier was able to complete one, was able to build a completely new relationship with a new pharmaceutical company whilst maintaining the relationships they had with their existing. And then finally, in the GMP space, we had a project where they wanted GMP qualified drug product. The researcher was able to find 3 suppliers. They could use the intelligence portal to identify the GMP accredited suppliers, look at the information on that supplier in advance. They were able to get 2 quotes straight away from them, and then from there they were able to purchase and move on. So with that, I hope it's given you some food for thought. It's not to say that the old way is bad. The old way has worked across industries, is tried and tested. I've researched it, I've studied it, I've qualified in it. I'm not saying it's the wrong way to do it. What I'm saying is that we've now reached a point where it's not the only way that we can do it. And this is the idea behind the talk today is to be able to feed your imaginations of what is possible versus what you used to being able to experience and understand.